whiteness of Pieter Kriel is the trauma he is trying to resolve with all of these nonsensical podcast appearances, as well as his ongoing statements about white guilt. I beg of Pieter, please don't bring me into your sick game of trying to find meaning in an ever-evolving world, making me feel guilty for being white. When not once have I actually heard you talk about the fact that the ANC has crippled this country in 31 years. And what are the plans to change that? Because until we deal with that, we will never be able to deal with the trauma and legacy of apartheid and your guilt of being white. Guys, welcome to my channel. Let's ramble. Pieter Kriel is Greta 2.0 and an absolute hypocrite, which is something that really irks me. Everything he says contradicts the previous statement he made. Pieter is 21 years old. He does not have 1 year of business experience under his belt. He doesn't even actually have a degree yet. So how did all of this come about? How did Pieter find his name in my radar? Just the other day, a post gets sent. You know, I'm totally defeated, says this post. Blacks love them whites, wondering whose clever idea was to let white boy go to China, pay him a lot of money, and he must speak on behalf of black business. We blacks have no self-respect. Yet I do question why we have this 21-year-old, not a degree, not a year's experience, traveling to China. China, Black Business Summer, Roots to Rise, Building Black Empires. Guest speaker, Pieter Kriel, South African human rights activist and political commentator. He gets to travel to the Ritz Hotel in Guangzhou, which is a city in China. But really, what on earth do you actually have to say at a business summit on behalf of black people? So quick heads up, this isn't a discussion about blackness and whiteness. It isn't about whether or not I support Pieter Kriel. I don't, by the way. This is about shedding light on the hypocrisy that is the so-called change makers, political avengers, and philosophers of whiteness. You know, all in the effort for economic transformation. My question is, where is your soul? Where is your action? Where is your results? Because to create change, you can't just be talking about it. And sitting on a couch in an air-conned office, talking on a podcast, but not once mentioning the failures and mismanagement from the ANC, which has perpetuated, continued, and almost sped up the legacy of apartheid. We cannot hold the dead people accountable. That is done, it is in the past. But can we look at the people who promised transformation and over 31 years have not only failed to deliver, they've also brought the entire country backwards. Where's that, Pieter? Where's that? I've spent 20 plus years as a communication specialist. And in all of that time, there are two things that I can pinpoint with exact factness that changed the way I engage with the world. So the first is, just because I don't like somebody doesn't mean they don't have something valuable to say. I have learned how to sit in my discomfort, forcing myself to open up my mind and listen with the intent to understand, not with the intent to respond. Very important. Listen with the intent to understand, not to respond. The second thing I've learned, inherent bias. This is just something that becomes part of you because of your upbringing, because of your parents' upbringing, which is then passed on to you. It is not something we are all automatically aware of, Pieter. And we need to challenge those inherent biases within ourselves before we stand up and preaching to others about the colonialism apartheid 21 years old. Apartheid was over for 10 years when you were born, Pieter. Please don't describe this as something you can even begin to understand. In some way, Pieter isn't just being a hypocrite. He's building a brand for himself, financially benefiting from these over-exaggerated gestures, talking in circles, using words I'm not sure actually make any real point, and they definitely don't highlight any plan to change the future. But don't worry about it, because Pieter has a qualification in creative writing. So here we have a snippet from the podcast, Palatable Politics. Pieter is talking about Helen Zille. I'm sure many of you have seen this. Let's take a quick look.
I implore you to show me one photo of Helen Zille marching in the forefront during apartheid. Yes, she opposed apartheid on paper. But was she marching in the forefronts, understanding the people's perspective, trying to resist? I don't see that. So I've never agreed that she was in the forefront of apartheid activism. I think, though, she was active in a certain activist network, that was mostly from the privilege of her couch when writing, not putting her life in danger like Ronnie Casserils did and other white activists during apartheid.
Writing from the comfort of her couch. Pieter, have you literally just stopped for a second and looked at where you're sitting? In an air-conned podcast studio, on a couch. I mean, it blows my mind. And then you want to criticize her for writing. There's here, Pieter Kriel, self-employed since December 2020. I'm a writer, he says. Philosophy, humanitarian studies. Wow, it just cannot get more hypocritical than that. This is where inherent bias comes from. Because Pieter cannot just look at his own situation and say, this is not my battle. I have no idea what happened during those times because I was born 10 years after it ended. Helen didn't know that some future generation, some future Greta, wanted her out there fighting the fight. She was brought up in a household that taught her a society that she was given, handed down from the societies before her, the cultures before her. And have you ever stopped to think, Pieter, that maybe at the time where she was sitting on her couch writing, it was the best she could do under the circumstances she had, with the skills she had, which is exactly what I'm doing. I'm not able to go out and do the fight. I have a couple of other issues I need to keep top of mind, which prevents me from doing that. Boy, oh boy, I am going to go through every single audit report and make videos about the absolute corruption that has plagued this country for years. And the fact that this whole apartheid thing will never be resolved if we do not first deal with the corruption. So, yeah, sorry, you need to leave Helen out of this. She didn't know better. At least she grew up to be a person who did see the horrors eventually. She did something about it with the resources and skills she had. And then she basically dedicated her life to opposing a party which turns out to be a terrorist organization. But I'm not hearing anything about that from you, Pieter, because the poverty, the lack of education, and the ongoing trauma from apartheid is now supported and fueled by the ANC, who are the people who promised to pull the people out of poverty. I love that like quadruple BPPBP. Pieter, Highville. So some other key points that Mr. Pieter wanted to make in this podcast for the 10 minutes that I could endure without me wanting to literally crawl to my screen, find him and explain to him that he's not really the adult yet that he needs to be in order to be making all of these grandstand statements about something he will never understand. Let's quickly watch this snippet from the interview who's saying, white privilege. So the interviewer says, you did grow up with white privilege. What does white privilege look like? Before I show you these clips from Pieter and Palatable Politics, please pay attention to Pieter's hand gesture. And it's ongoing. He doesn't stop. I mean, I have a lot of hand gestures, but I am able to stop at some point. But he constantly hand gestures, hand gestures, hand gestures. It almost becomes annoying once you notice it. Very, very distracting. And the fact that he sits with his hands like this is a very clear indication to me that he has studied this, he has been taught this, he's gone for training, there's something there. These very consistent hand gestures as well as him sitting like that. This is a position of power which leaders, CEOs, Pieter, who have many years of business under the belt, do when they're sitting at the head of the boardroom table, not when they haven't even received their degree yet.
Moving on to the aspect of white privilege, you're saying that you did grow up with white privilege. What does white privilege look like?
Yeah. To me, white privilege manifests in many different ways. It manifests in physical, economic value, like money and owning a house or inheriting a house or property or land that has been taken in a forceful or...
Because he literally says it manifests economic value like money and owning a house or inheriting a house or property. Mr. Pieter, I implore you to do your research before going in front of the camera. Cyril Ramaphosa in March 2024, his Ntabi Nyoni cattle auction earned almost 15 million in sales. That's hard to come by, yes, but by 2015, so this was already 10 years ago, Cyril was estimated to be worth 6.4 billion rand. My dad worked himself to death, literally. I almost worked myself to death, but don't worry, because Cyril has 6.4 billion rand, and Mr. Johan Rupert, who is like the epitome of apartheid beneficiary, continues to own thousands of hectares of land and a large majority of South African companies. Anyway, Pieter, he also owns 7 retirement villages, and I kid you not, 24 townhouses. I mean, he actually has the galls to say being raised and taught from a young age that being white means being superior. Who are your parents, Pieter? Please don't speak on my behalf either, because my parents brought me up to be humble and contrite, like Tumi says. I was brought up to believe that everybody adds value, no matter what their role. I even take the moment to look at the beggar in the eye and say, I'm sorry, I cannot help you right now. So please don't say that I was taught being white means being superior. And all your yabba dabba do about white guilt definitely did dim the fire on that, if there was even flame. Being smarter, bearers of civilization, not by choice, Pieter, not by choice. Like the rhetoric, the ongoing repetitive rhetoric is just mind-numbingly boring. The race card expired, I think, last year. The white privilege card expires at the end of this year. No matter who you are, if you appear in front of a camera for a podcast, media, etc., even if you have to print it out and read it off the paper, you will absolutely have your facts and figures in front of you. I would never let you climb in front of stage and answer a question like Pieter is about to. So the host says to him, how would you say your perspective or engagement has been on the other side, meaning now the black side of life, coming from his position of white privilege? So firstly, he says, talking in terms of social media, right? I mean, if that's what you want to discuss, Pieter, then let's discuss that. But listen to what he says here. It is very evident that he is not actually involved or educated on the actual daily struggles of Africans in South Africa. He printed out a grok speech edited it via ChatGPT, spell-checked it via Gemini, and printed it out. Lucky little bugger now gets to go to China and stay in the Ritz. I didn't know it was that easy to go overseas. Let's take a look.
How would you say your perspective or engagement has been on the other side? So, I mean, fine, as a white man, when you interact with a black man, how do you think, or how have you experienced that influencing or determining the behavior or actions, words, etc. of the black man, woman, etc.?
We're talking in terms of social media, right?
Yeah, well, whether it's social media, day-to-day politics, just however.
So, starting out with my political commentary about a year ago, seriously, automatically I realized that people from within my own community found great offense by what I had to say. But I have noticed that I am receiving more and more comments from our African community saying that, well, what is this guy's agenda? What is he trying to do? Does he have presidential ambitions? And is he trying to deceive us?
I mean, he actually says, I had a lot of good interactions from the disadvantaged communities, specifically people from townships. And you see the host pull his lips in, which is more often than not a behavior which shows that you're wanting to hold back your opinion. You have something to say, but you're not going to say it. That's what that means. He says, I still have a lot of hate from the white community, but I have noticed that I have received more and more comments from our African community saying, what is this guy's agenda? What is he trying to do? Is he trying to deceive us? But it just blows my mind that he actually hasn't, like he judged Helen. Pieter, have you gone into the townships, woken up at 4 a.m. with these gogos, washed in the cold water, gone and stood in a taxi queue at 5:30 so that you can be at work at 7? Huh? And then you have to work all day, and then you have to stand in the queue again. You only get home at 7. You still have to cook. But what about the washing? Your neighbor's drunk. That one's beating up his girlfriend. Have you done any of that, Pieter? Pieter, have you traveled in a taxi before? Like a proper skadonk taxi? Because, Pieter, I have. I have climbed into a taxi. I've had to deal with the taxi driver. I mean, they're shocked, but it is what it is. Have you done any of that? Have you seen the streets of Wynberg by Sandton? Do you know what the inside of Wynberg looks like? That township? Because I have, Pieter. Have you seen the inside of Soweto? Have you driven the streets of Soweto? Have you been to any of those Soweto schools, Pieter? Because I have. But you don't find me sitting on podcasts claiming to profess that I know anything about the struggles of the people who are still suffering the legacy of apartheid because they are kept uneducated so that they can be bamboozled by emotional pandering such as the ones you do whenever the camera's on. Email me, Pieter, nextrambled@gmail.com. I'll take you to Soweto. I'll take you to Wynberg. I'll even organize you an overnight stay in a shack so that you can wake up at 3:30 to deal with the very bull that is a disadvantaged life. Okay? Otherwise, really, all I can say is, please just shut up. It's like it's embarrassing. I do like this question that the host has for Pieter. What impact has apartheid had on society, and how long can we blame it for? So Pieter carries on, blah-de-blah-de-blah, wah-wah.
What impact has apartheid had on society today? And how long can we blame it?
Yeah. No, I think when we look at apartheid, that is a specific handle given to an extensive period of time that has had negative impacts before we gave it the handle. And I started with colonialism. They started trade. South Africa has had negative economic benefits going back 400-500 years because we have to realize that they were saying people were excluded, they were wars, and this has economic impacts to this day. Apartheid is colonialism.
Apartheid is colonialism with a different name. thank you, Pieter. Maybe this is something you and I can agree with when I break it down for you. What that actually means is that the negative economic benefits that you stated, I can blame on colonialism, because it is because of colonialism that we had apartheid, that we have so-called democracy. This is all colonialism's fault. I am just a consequence of it, but I am definitely not to blame. I mean, then he goes on to say that we should stop blaming people that point out the devastating effects of apartheid, both economically and mentally. Yes, we actually do need to blame you, because you're bringing up a historical event we can do nothing about. The people who are responsible for addressing the devastation, economical and mental, who are, by the way, currently in power, have been in power for 31 years. That's their fault. So I am going to blame you, because you're bringing up a rhetoric we can do nothing about. It's a rhetoric we've spoken about year on year for 31 years. I'm tired. I'm bored. Can you please focus on the people who have failed to deliver on the redress? Not once did you mention any of that. The host says, how do you change mindset? And here we go, Mr. Pieter. It's important to have education be impactful and designed in a way to prioritize creative thinking and analytical thinking and radical thinking over memorization.
Mentally, how do you change the mindset?
Yeah, I think it's important to have education be impactful and designed in a way to prioritize creative thinking and analytical thinking and radical thinking over memorization.
Now, Pieter, let me ask you, the education crisis we have in South Africa at the moment, why do we have that? Why has no progress been made in terms of providing creative thinking and analytical thinking? To close off my ramble, I want to quickly read you a couple of points out of this open letter to Pieter from Gillian Shute 3 months ago. I will leave the link to this in the description. I just want to point out a couple of things that really summarize what I'm trying to say here. Firstly, Mr. Pieter, Bethlehem is a sacred cage where the world comes to worship a baby born under empire. Have you checked where you're sitting, Pieter? I bet you that's also airconned. What on earth are you doing in Bethlehem? Gillian says, there is a violence in forcing people to speak, the pain caused by white power in the presence of whiteness. Learn when to step out, Pieter, to even think that you can understand, and to then even talk about the pain as if it's yours to talk about. Pieter, I tell you this so you understand that I am not speaking to you from theory. I am speaking to you from survival. You are simply not experienced enough to understand the depth of wounding whiteness can inflict on people not protected by white skin. Even from the most well-meaning of us, your post sent from Bethlehem, from inside the cage of empire that you occupy, through your white privilege, your passport, your ability to move freely, is the height of white arrogance. Yes, under no circumstances may I even begin to think that I have an opinion in the Gaza-Israel-Palestine situation. Who the hell am I to think that I can even begin to understand the suffering that's happening there? So I'm going to step out. I'm going to say I cannot contribute to this. I cannot contribute meaningfully. I can contribute meaningfully dealing with the corruption in my own country by making videos and educating people. Pieter, your post sent from inside the cage of empire that you occupy through your white privilege, your passport, your ability to move freely, is the height of white arrogance. That is so poetic, I'm actually getting goosebumps. Gillian also says, and yet you sit there, Pieter, in your hotel chair composing your post, you center yourself, you wrap Bethlehem around your performance of atheism, as if your personal rejection of faith is relevant here, as if the mothers whispering Miriam's name over their dead or the children holding onto the memory of a sire as a face like theirs, need your existential rebellion. And here, look at this little photo. Aren't you just the cutest little thing sitting in the bush, tattooed? Do you have access to a gym? Hey, what's happening here, Pieter? Gillian says, you do realize that sitting center stage and telling people what to think or believe is just another form of toxic white patriarchy. It is hard not to see you. Even though I do not follow you, every time I open my social media, there you are. Same, Gillian, same. And this is 3 months later. But we have not yet seen you in Gaza, Pieter. We have not seen you at the place of danger, at the rubble heaps where families are clawing through debris to find their children, at the refugee camps where hunger hangs in the air. We have hardly seen Nkosi Zulu, the fellow podcaster you travel with, because you have, it seems, centered yourself, or as I like to say, living in your trauma. You have placed yourself in the frame, made this about your musings, your performance, your moment. South Africa's version of Greta. Gillian, you are a master writer. So this is Gillian's advice to Pieter. If you want to step into the crisis of meaning among Black youth, enter it with care. Understand that this crisis is not abstract. It is the crisis of growing up in a world that markets Blackness as cool, but locks Black people out of power. It is the crisis of living with betrayals by families, by leaders, by movements that promise transformation but handed down exhaustion. That last sentence really is it, because I think we need to stop saying that the impoverished Black people want the legacy of apartheid abolished. I think at this stage, what the impoverished Black communities in South Africa are struggling with is the crisis of living with betrayals from families, from leaders, from movements that promise transformation but handed down exhaustion. That is our problem, Pieter, not apartheid. Watching white people like you monetize their pain, presenting as hashtag revolutionaries, while the poorest Blacks' lives remain ungrievable. Because everything you're doing, Pieter, isn't actually driving change. You're just talking about historical events. You're musing about the past. You should join the ANC. They too like to muse about the past. We veterans know that not one original idea has come out of your strident, confident, know-it-all posture. To step into this fragile and painful space and position yourself as philosopher, as guide, as mouthpiece begins to feel like decoy politics. We have long passed a stage where white boys in crisp shirts and borrowed slogans get to stand on occupied terrain and tell people how to feel about their ancient culture and spiritual beliefs. But their mother, Okey Pokey, goes to China to talk about Black business. So not only is he talking to the Chinese, he's talking to the Chinese about the Black man. Like he literally has absolutely no role to play in that business summit. She says it is as if their personal crisis of faith carries more weight than centuries of survival, as if their intellectual swagger accounts for more than ancestral memory. Yuh, yeah, talk about putting Pieter in his place. If you truly care, take your seat at the back, read, listen, name your sources, understand the responsibility that comes with speaking in public. Understand that solidarity is not built on your center stage. It is built where you are unseen, where others lead, where you stop feeding on spectacle and start dismantling the need for it. Oh, got goosebumps again. This is exactly actually what I'm trying to say to Pieter. Stop feeding the spectacle. Start dismantling the need for it, which requires you to take action. Okay, guys, to summarize it all up for you, quickly, not out to all of you who have made it this far. But really, at what point do we move beyond that which is inherently part of South Africa's history. We all just need to say, ach, nee man, it is what it is. I'm sorry. I, in my current state, am unable to do anything about it. But how about we all stand off our little pedestals of white privilege, Pieter, and forge and create a new path? Look forward. Talk to me about the disadvantaged communities that you work with. Who? Name a name. Is there an organization? Which township? Which community? What initiative, what project, and what plan do you currently have in play, Pieter, that allows you to have any sort of understanding of the suffering of the Black people? And why, for somebody who was born 10 years after the end of apartheid, are you not focused on the people who are reinforcing that suffering? Don't you think your efforts would be a little more, effective in that spectrum? Sometimes all these people do is talk. Cyril, Julius, MK, Pieter, alles, all of them. Talky. Emotional ball that gets us nowhere. But if you listen to what they're saying, there are no stats, no facts, no figures, no plans, no initiatives, no results. Where's the group of people who are looking forward and saying, okay, this is the situation. Clearly, something's not working. What do we do to move forward? And the vast majority agree. Blood, sweat, and tears. Grow the economy, fix education, fix rule of law, abolish BEE. That is my ramble for today, guys. Remember, subscribe if you want to show your support. It's a free action from your side. It definitely helps me financially. I kid you not. Otherwise, just drop me a comment. Let me know what you think about Mr. Pieter and the fact that the white card has now officially expired. Guys, I appreciate all your support. Nikki, you sit in spot number 1. Bigger shout out for you. Guys, thank you for sticking with me through this. I hope it was insightful. Good luck for the rest of the week. Over and out.